The Virtual Foundry makes metal and ceramic 3D printing that anyone can use. Today we're going to check in with Tricia Cease, President, and Mike Daniels, Global Sales Leader, to learn a little bit about what they do and also about how COVID-19 may be affecting them. Thank you so much for joining us today, of course, virtually here. Nice to see you.
Yes, thank you.
So lots of questions for you. This is really interesting to me. Let's first start with kind of the basics. Run us through, what is metal 3D printing exactly?
Well, the simplest form of 3D printing involves melting a thin layer of plastic filament and laying it down in a layer, then adding another layer and another layer until you've built an object from the bottom up. Metal 3D printing is the same idea, except instead of just using plastic, you're using mostly metal with just a little bit of plastic included. There are lots of different ways to 3D print metal, though. Some of those require expensive machines.
Okay, that is just fascinating to me. You've got a printer going in the background. I think that's fun. We get to see it a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about the Virtual Foundry. So 3D printing is something that, some folks might be a little bit familiar with. How does the Virtual Foundry fit in?
Well, essentially what we do is we're a materials manufacturer. So that little piece of string looking thing or filament that Tricia held up a minute ago was just plastic. And what we do is we make the same thing, but we make it with a little bit of plastic and a real lot of metal. Essentially what you can do is you can take our material, which is mostly metal, and you can put it through a common desktop 3D printer, just like you'll find in most high schools throughout the country, including Dane County. And then what you can ultimately do is you can take that part and you can actually put it into a kiln, just like you or your kids used in high school to heat their pottery. And you can melt the plastic out, continue to heat it up, and then actually weld all those metal particles together. So what we do is we allow people to 3D print metal at a fraction of the cost of just about any other technology or company in the world.
That's so incredible. And I mentioned in my intro, you've touched on it here now, it's pretty readily available, and so anybody can do this. What equipment do you need to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So to dive just slightly deeper into what I just said is that you'll need a standard desktop 3D printer. The type is referred to as FDM or FFF, which is going to be the most common household or school 3D printer that you can find. So one of those, they cost as little as $200 all the way up to several $100,000, depending on what you personally desire. So outside of the 3D printer, you'll also need a furnace if you choose to bring your print to pure metal state, which is not required for some purposes such as radiation shielding. But that furnace or that kiln is what you're going to actually do that heating process with, of melting the plastic out and then welding the metal particles together.
Wow, this is, I think, just fascinating and interesting. Let's talk about how this sort of came to be. How did you come up with this?
Well, it all started with inventor Brad Woods in his shop in his basement here in Stoughton, Wisconsin. He's been working for decades looking at powdered metal and figuring out different ways to manipulate metal without using extreme heat or without melting it. So he's been working on this for a while. He tried 3D printing for the first time, printed a standard plastic object, and immediately recognized the potential for this regular 3D printing technology and its potential to be able to 3D print metal. So he immediately set to work figuring out ways to get powdered metal into this filament format so that this common 3D printer would be able to use it. The next logical step, of course, is to build a homemade extruder in your basement, which is something that we all do, right? But he was successful at his effort, and now we are selling 25 different kinds of metals and ceramics with the ability to create custom filaments too, like molybdenum and other exciting materials.
That is just great. And yes, I will be getting to that this weekend in the basement, of course. I had to break in just a minute here. Only about 30 seconds left, but a really important question. I want to know about how 3D printing has been affected by the COVID-19 crisis, so you actually are able to help.
Yeah, 3D printing or additive manufacturing has really done an exceptional job of complementing traditional manufacturing methods and creating PPP and those necessary ventilating parts. 3D printing can offer a shorter design phase and a faster turnaround in many cases.
Really great stuff. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about what you're doing at Virtual Foundry. I find it fascinating. Thanks for your time. We got to go to break, but we'll be right back with more Talk Wisconsin after this.